appreciate it. My name is Scott Benzie. I'm the Director of Marketing at Dundas Data Visualization. I'm not going to give you too much of a background on us because I know Nelson is going to get into it here. Long story short, one of the things we're very passionate about is data visualization. While we are software-based and at the core of our business is a piece of software, everything we do is with the best intentions towards representing data factually. And that's one of the things Nelson's going to talk to you about today. It is very important to us. You know, numbers and figures can lie, data can lie, and graphically representing that information properly is really at the core of what we do at Dundas. I'm not sure what everybody's core competencies are in the room today, but we are always hiring. So if anybody is looking for internships or jobs, our head of development has told me that if there are any software developers in the room, to come talk to me after the presentation, please. We have a bunch of exciting things coming up. So if any of you are interested in getting into the data visualization field, please don't hesitate to come talk to me. Again, my name is Scott, and I will be here after Nelson presents. That being said, I'd like to present Nelson Ng to you. He is our principal consultant and our guru of everything good about data visualization. So thank you for your time. I'd like to thank the Association of Information Systems here at UofT for bringing us in, and hopefully we can do this again, and hopefully we'll generate some good conversation. All yours, Nelson.
Thanks, Scott. Can you guys hear me? You guys hear me at the back? Everybody okay? First of all, I wanted to thank, again, Association for Information Systems here at UofT, and in particular, David, Kim, and Octavio. I don't know, can't see anything. Thank you guys. You guys have been awesome. And thank you all for joining this evening. Hopefully you've got a bit of caffeine in your system. I'll try my best not to be boring. There are more people than I thought there would be in this room, but I'd like to keep this open all the same, so if you have any questions, just maybe raise your hand. John over there is our mic rover, and we'll maybe get a mic over to you. So I'm particularly excited to be presenting some concepts about data visualization to you today. So without further ado, let me just launch into this presentation. You've probably, no doubt, heard a lot about data lately. We're more than half a century now into the information age. Concepts and marketing buzzwords like big data, data scientists, and the Internet of Everything are all over the place. I think we're at a point where if we just try to describe how much data is collected, stored, and organized every single year, the number of bytes, orders of magnitude, and trailing zeros are almost impossible to imagine. Even the words we use to quantify how much data we have are starting to get more and more ridiculous. We have gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and now zettabytes. The engineering challenges that we must overcome to handle all of this data are incredible. Data is being collected everywhere. We have sensors in just about everything. It's in our shoes now, in our plants. Big data and analytics help us do everything from hailing a cab to analyzing even your voice when you've been on hold for an hour to see how irate you are. So for all this hype and all this excitement, you'd think that the data challenges of yesteryear are gone. Well, this isn't what we've seen at Dundas. In fact, if you listen in on the calls that we have all the time with prospects and clients, you'll probably be surprised at how basic some of the data challenges they have are. We still hear things like drowning in data, analysis paralysis, many versions of the truth, information silos, and people exclaiming, I spend all of my time putting reports together rather than analyzing the data or doing anything with it. What we've learned is that while we've come a long way with regards to collecting, storing, and organizing all this data, all of it is only worth something if this data is understood by human beings. And today, for most of us, consuming this insane volume of data is sort of like drinking out of a fire hose. And even that might be an understatement. A lot of people we've talked to feel trapped, hence the term analysis paralysis. They don't know what to do with all this data, but they know that it's worth looking at somehow. To me, this is tragic. I have to wonder how much we actually know about the world around us, even beyond the business world. If you look at hot-button topics in the news, where your tax money goes, what unemployment actually looks like, what our violent crime statistics are, how we're managing the cost of healthcare. We debate, argue, take extreme positions, and sometimes we even fight over things that we're not entirely sure of. Now, the term last mile, is used in telecommunications, supply chain management, and transportation. It describes the very last leg of a journey. Ignore it, and all the investments you make beforehand are for naught. Now, the last mile of the information journey is the human brain. And we tend to think that compared to computers, humans are vastly inferior at processing data. And certainly, at least when it comes to recalling facts and figures, this is quite true. Dean Buonomano, professor of neurobiology and psychology at the University of California, wrote in his book, Brain Bugs, "The fact of the matter is that your brain was simply not built to store unrelated bits of information, such as names and numbers." Fortunately, for all of its inherent weaknesses, the brain does indeed have a few tricks up its sleeve. Consider the amount of technology and computing power that's required to develop a computer that can defeat a human opponent at chess or Jeopardy, like Watson. And for all of this power, consider that computers are still confounded when it comes to reading distorted words and letters. If you've ever encountered a system like CAPTCHA, it can be infuriating sometimes because even I can't read it. And this same technology is actually being used in quite an extraordinary fashion by millions of people every day now to help digitize books, newspapers, and old-time radio shows. And that's been called reCAPTCHA. Pretty cool stuff. Clearly, there's something to the way our brains work that gives us an incredible edge. 70% of our body's sense receptors are in our eyes. That's incredible. 50% of our brain is devoted to the visual sense. It's no accident that when we say, "Oh, now I see it," that's synonymous with understanding. There's an immensely strong link between seeing something and cognition. It's quite easy to see how incredibly effective our eyes are at processing data. Here are four kind of seemingly random sets of numbers. How many of you, well, take a moment now to study and see if you can find anything. Good luck. How many people have a stats background here? Come on. Okay, now let's try it. This is the same data visualized using very simple dot plots. The information you get from this is almost instantaneous. You don't have to know what the numbers are or what we're even measuring here. You can see that the human brain is extraordinarily powerful at processing this sort of information. Let's put a real-life example on the screen. So, anybody who works in business is going to deal with a much more complicated version of this. We're looking at sales revenue for the year. Can you guys in the back kind of see the numbers? So we've got US and European sales, really high-level stuff, January right through to December. And study that for a moment to see if you see any patterns, any outliers, any exceptions. Here's that same data visualized in the most basic line chart. So what kind of patterns, if we can get some audience participation, what kind of patterns do you guys see here? You're not allowed to answer. I'm sorry. Anybody? Yeah.
Well, the most obvious is US is trending up, but it cycles every couple of months. Europe is flatlining and dips in August for some reason.
And how long did that take you to process?
A few moments.
Yeah. And so you've recognized exactly what there is. We've got a generally increasing trend in the US. Seems to cycle every 3 months. We've got this dip every quarter. Might be an indication that salespeople tend to work harder at the end of each quarter. And Europe is largely flat. We've got an anomaly in August. We don't know what that is. Could be bad data. Maybe they're on vacation. Now, why does this work so well? Here's how our visual sense works. This is as described by an author called Stephen Few. Light bounces off of surfaces and is sensed by our eyes. Now, any object that we perceive as a whole is actually broken down into a whole bunch of little visual attributes. And these properties are known as pre-attentive attributes. Pre-attentive means that they happen without and even before cognition. Your brain's just naturally tuned to sense these. We'll go over these in greater detail in a bit. But what happens when we're presented with a data graphic like the one we just saw is that we perceive it and we think about it at the same time. This is called parallel processing, and it's enormously powerful. You think about how much data has just been presented in front of you, and you, without really having to think about it, you already have a pretty good idea of what's going on. We'll revisit these pre-attentive attributes later on. Colin Ware, researcher, a well-known kind of visual perception researcher, has said this. Sorry to read this. The human visual system is a pattern seeker of enormous power and subtlety. The eye and the visual cortex of the brain form a massively parallel processor that provides the highest bandwidth channel into human cognitive centers. Hardly sounds like we're talking about humans here. However, the visual system has its own rules. We can easily see patterns presented in certain ways, but if they are presented in other ways, they become invisible. If we can understand how perception works, our knowledge can be translated into rules for displaying information. If we disobey these rules, our data will be incomprehensible or misleading. So let's get an example of how that works. Another challenge, just blurt it out if you can figure this out. I just want you to count the number sevens here.
Seven.
Wow, okay, not bad. Okay, this wasn't as powerful a demonstration as I thought it would be. I was hoping for some more outlandish numbers. I've heard 29 before. So. But I don't have to go on and on about, just here all we've done is tweak the colors. And we've instantly revealed a lot of information. Hans Rosling, how many of you have heard of him before? Okay, so bear with me, this might not be new for you. He may be known for having the world's most famous bubble chart. He's known as a rock star of statistics. He's a professor, a statistician, and founder of an organization called Gapminder, and he's an advocate for global health. So I'm about to show you a quick video here.
Of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person. $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubble showed the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only the UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
So that's from BBC series Joy of Stats. What do you guys think? It's pretty cool. That was one of the, when I started working at Dundas in 2009, that was one of the first videos I saw. And so it's stuck with me since. I mean, can you imagine processing 120,000 numbers and trying to make sense of it all without visualization? Data graphics, we can no longer see them merely as fancy or optional alternatives to tables and numbers. They have the unique ability to solve problems that tables and numbers cannot. They take the process of understanding data beyond the silos of highly specialized people and people with majors in statistics, and they democratize that information to people of average technical ability. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here today to show you how you can easily improve the way that you analyze and present data in your daily lives by using some very simple techniques and principles. The practice of data visualization, when you apply it properly, has enormously positive implications on how we make decisions, whether as members of an organization, as individuals, or as an informed citizenry. How many of you think data visualization is pretty cool? So I don't have to sell you on that, and that's why I decided to call this presentation Beyond the Hype. I think we don't have to convince people that it's pretty cool. I think we have to move on to the next step and help people understand how we can derive more value. When we spend time creating it for businesses, well, where's the return on our investment? And how can we realize that? I think data visualizations today are kind of where PowerPoint was at when it first came out. How many of you remember PowerPoint slides from the 90s? Yeah. I remember my first time creating a PowerPoint deck. I hit every button I could, animations, word art, typewriter sounds, explosions. It was about PowerPoint. It wasn't about communicating. And then we have web design. About a decade ago, people started going nuts with all sorts of different types of graphics and different ways of designing web pages. They made it as cool as possible. And now when we look back at what our Angel, Fire, or GeoCities sites used to look like, it's kind of appalling. And I think that with regards to the data visualization explosion and the infographic explosion, chances are that when we look back at what we're doing today, we might see some of the same things. I work as a consultant, at a company called Dundas Data Visualization. We're based in Toronto. And we have a mission that's very, very simple. And that is to help people make better and faster decisions with their data. We do that by helping people visualize their data, and often we just visualize it for them. Often the first thing we have to do is actually diffuse the hype. People are expecting animations and 3D and explosions. The goal of a visualization is not to be cool or to even be beautiful. The goal of a visualization is to solve a business problem as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Being cool or beautiful, these things are byproducts of great design, and we'll talk about what that means. So what do we do at Dundas? We sell software and services. Our software is a development tool known by developers as a platform that helps people create custom dashboards. It allows people of average technical ability to create dashboards that are hooked up to their company's data sources, and also allows developers of extraordinary technical ability to go crazy and do all sorts of custom things. Our services team offers consulting, advisory, training, and end-to-end implementation. We do everything for organizations. We've been around for about 20 years, and we started off really as a software shop. We created tools for software developers to create their own graphics and put them into programs or websites. These evolved into data visualization tools, and they became extraordinarily successful. Three of our products, Dundas Chart, Gauge, and Map, were actually acquired by Microsoft in 2007, and if you use SQL Server reporting services, SharePoint, Visual Studio, a lot of those, the visual components, come from us. In 2009, though, we took all of that power that was formerly in the domain of developers, and we started making that available to average business users. People use Excel or maybe even Access, PowerPoint. How can we help these people extract the same amount of power that was previously only available to extraordinarily technical people? And so our product that we launched in 2009 is called Dundas Dashboard, and we'll show you a little bit about that today. Hands up if you're from Dundas, just to let people know. So we've got a bunch of folks here from Dundas that are here. Afterwards, we've got drinks, snacks, pizza, I think, David. So if you want to stick around, we'd be happy to talk to you. That's why we're here. If you want to learn more about things, I don't want to take up too much time in this setting, but we'd love for you to come chat with us, and we'd love to learn more about you as well. We've got over 70 people today, and we're in the Don Mills and Eglinton area. If you're not familiar, it's about 15 minutes north of here. And we're in that building on the right. And so beyond attending this workshop, we'd love to have the chance to meet you all. Now, we tend to think that visualization is a bit of a recent phenomenon. But the truth is that visual communication has existed for thousands of years. 5,000 years ago, some of the first geographic maps started appearing on clay tablets and on the walls of caves. This map is called the Yu-Chi-2 map, map of the tracks of Yu the Great. This was created by an unknown geographer around the 11th century. 12th century in China. And it's an extraordinary piece of work because it's remarkably precise. And this is one of the landmarks when you look back at the history of data visualization. Often it'll start here. It was hundreds of years ahead of its time. In 1701, English astronomer Edmund Halley created this map, and it was the first map to show lines of equal magnetic variation. Quite an incredible accomplishment. Oops, sorry about that. Zooming out over and over again. In 1854, a London physician by the name of John Snow created one of the best-known thematic maps of its time. How many of you have seen this before? Okay, I'm not teaching anybody anything new here. I'm going to plow along. His analysis, well, what was happening during the time is there was an outbreak of cholera. And what he did was he took the most accurate map of London he could, and he started plotting out all the instances of deaths from cholera on a map. And what he realized was that a lot of them were occurring around the Broad Street pump, right in the middle. And at his request, they removed the handle from the pump, and the cases of cholera disappeared almost instantly. So a very early application of plotting data on a map. Now, it wasn't until the 17th century, though, that Descartes started plotting data on a two-dimensional axis. So he started, he abstracted data from the physical world and started plotting it in 2D. And this took us to 1786. William Playfair, Scottish social scientist, created this chart to show trade deficits and surpluses. His inventions include the pie chart and the bar chart. And he was one of the first to use lines to show changes throughout time, quite like you see here. How many of you have seen this one? Wow, okay. I'll be brief then, just so we don't let down the people who haven't seen this before. Charles Joseph Menard was a French engineer. 1869, he created this graphic, and it shows you the fate of Napoleon's army. So it starts at the Niemen River, and if you see that brown band, that shows the size of Napoleon's army. It starts off at 422,000 strong. And the thickness of the band as it goes across the map shows the size of the army as they travel to Russia. And the black band shows the retreat from Russia. And what's particularly striking is you can see all the different changes to the size of the army, all the casualties at each point. What's even more incredible about this chart is if you follow the retreat at various points here, he's also linked it to the temperature that the soldiers were experiencing at the time. It actually shows the really bitterly cold winter temperatures that might have contributed to a lot of the deaths. It's a pretty gory scene, actually. It's a data graphic, but it's incredibly multidimensional. Think about just the sheer amount of data here that's presented to you at a single glance. Often considered as one of the best statistical graphics of all time. Very cool. Moving on to Florence Nightingale. She was an English statistician, founder of modern nursing, and she invented the polar area diagram. But this takes us to the 19th and 20th century. We have Charles Babbage, who created the difference engine, Alan Turing, father of maybe modern computer science. IBM in the 50s, beginning the data management industry. In the 70s, we get to the first appearance of data graphics on a computer screen, appearance of personal computers, and one of the first computers that I started working on when I was a kid, and that's the Macintosh, graphical interfaces. And shortly after this, Microsoft Excel. And in the history of data graphics, this is a pretty noteworthy development because it allowed all of us to start tinkering around with software and creating our own data graphics very quickly. In the meantime, three more notable figures in data visualization. Jacques Bertin, he was one of the first to recognize that if you present something in accordance to how your brain works, that could be quite extraordinary. John Tukey, famous statistician, in 1977 came out with this landmark book, Exploratory Data Analysis, and it was a huge paradigm shift for statistics because it introduced the concept of using visualizations for statistical analysis. 1983, Edward Tufte came out with this book, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, known to many as the Bible of modern information graphics. Tufte is, professors came out with quite a few books since, and he introduced the notion of things like the data to ink ratio, the spark line. We'll talk about a couple of those things later. But the main thing that he did in my mind was highlight how bad a lot of data graphics are and what precisely was wrong with them. Fast forward to 2004, Stephen Few, known as a thought leader for data graphics for use in business, came out with this book, Show Me the Numbers. We've got a bunch over there, and you'll see what they're there for in a bit. He came out with 3 books, one which was devoted to dashboard design. And that is really one of the most important books for dashboard design out there today. And you'll see some of his principles at work as well. Where does that bring us to today? Information graphics are everywhere. They're exploding. We can hardly count just how many are appearing in the world today. Every major news organization, bloggers, are all using this. This is a really good visualization, actually, of the 2008 US election, done by the New York Times. I don't know if you've heard of David McCandless TED Talks, but he created this graphic. It's actually quite controversial in best practices circles, but what he did was show how, without a sense of data, how skewed our news is sometimes. We make a huge fuss about things that aren't actually all that important. Mountains out of molehills, for example. SimCity 2013 just came out, and here's another example of data graphics now permeating even into our video games. So, they're not all good. And what I wanted to do is spend a little bit of time to show you what we're doing wrong. And this is not to be mean-spirited, but I think the best way to learn is sometimes to see what not to do. So bear with me as we venture through this hall of shame. This one's a doozy. These are called cone charts, and they're plotted on a 3-dimensional axis. Any comments about this one, actually? How many of you think it's a good graphic? Yeah?
Is it serious?
This one actually isn't serious. That's a good call. This one was made in jest. Somebody basically went in Excel and turned on every single feature he could, flipped it on, and fine. Here's a serious one. Any comments? Now you guys are all laughing. What is wrong with it, though? Let's actually try and dissect this.
Just hiding a lot of the information needlessly.
Yeah, we're obscuring a lot of the data, and that's one of the bigger problems with 3D graphics. Anything else? Yeah?
It's not 3-dimensional information, it's just n-dimensional.
Yeah, that's another good point. There's some hands at the back there.
So it's not proportional to like the height of the column is a little off in some cases. I think because of the 3D effect.
Yeah. On that note, if we didn't have the numbers there, how effectively would you be able to read that? Okay, let's move on. I'm not harping on 3D, but I'm doing this to kind of prove a point. What is the value of hammer in March? Go. Anybody?
98.
I think it's a little bit over 100, can't be certain. What about the wrench market in March? Is that higher or lower than the hammer market? And it's easy to laugh, but when you turn on a lot of these programs, the first thing they'll do is pivot it on an axis, because that's inevitably what a lot of bosses want you to do to spice up your presentations in PowerPoint. Any comments about this one? We all use pie charts. I used 2 earlier. What do you think about this one?